Hello there. This headline is very sensationalist. Yes, America is Europe's enemy now. Do you really feel that way? If you live in Europe, do you really feel that America is now your enemy? I don't think so. But this writer does from foreignpolicy.com. It says here the Trump administration has gone way past revising the transatlantic alliance. A few weeks ago, I warned that the second Trump administration might be squandering the tolerance and goodwill that Washington had long received from the world's major democracies. Instead of seeing the United States as a mostly positive force in world affairs, these states might now have to worry that the US is actively malevolent. That column was written before Vice President J.D. Vance gave his confrontational speech at the Munich Security Conference, before President Donald Trump blamed Ukraine for starting the war with Russia, and before US officials appeared to preemptively offer Russia almost everything it wants before negotiations on Ukraine were even underway. Now let's examine these three claims. First, the idea that J.D. Vance was attacking Europe in his speech. He was attacking a lack of freedom of speech in Europe. He was attacking the bureaucracy taking over and essentially oppressing dissent, which is not Western and not democratic. And incidentally, I believe he was right to do so. I saw an interesting article today where basically here, I'll show you the clip. It's this clip, right? It's when asked if praying by the window in your home could be a crime under the buffer zone law, Gillian McKay, MSP, she's basically the member of the Scottish Parliament, claims that depends on who's passing the window. The same politician has repeatedly claimed that J.D. Vance was lying. He was talking about people being arrested for praying in their own home, potentially if they are close to an abortion clinic. And it seems he was right.
Well, what about the accusation that even private prayer within your own home could amount to breaking the law? I mean, it's stretching it, but it's not wrong, is it?
It's absolute nonsense.
Is it? I'm looking at a letter that the government sent to householders.
Nowhere does it say private prayer.
No, but what it does say is that the activities in a private place like a house in these zones could be an offence if they can be seen or heard within the zone and are done intentionally or recklessly. Now, if you're telling me that prayer can be an offence outside a clinic, if you're inside your own house in that zone, theoretically, the law could be applied to you, couldn't it? I was just trying to work out if there's any way in which J.D. Vance could be right.
I should be really clear. Praying in of itself is not an offence under this bill. We are not banning prayer under the Act.
Performative prayer. If you're standing at a window with your hands together in front of your face in that classic kind of, that classic image of prayer, if you're standing at a window so people can see you, then could it be interpreted as an offence?
That then depends on who's passing the window and whether anybody can actually. No, he is wrong, because if I don't know anyone that can pray loudly or performatively enough to be seen from outside their own house.
So, this is Scotland today, my friends. If you live near an abortion clinic and somebody glimpses you from the window praying, or perhaps hears you, then you could be sent to jail for it. That's interesting. That's very interesting. So this sort of thing is exactly what J.D. Vance was talking against, basically saying you are going too far against freedom of speech. Way too far. You are abandoning the principles of democracy. And this is considered an attack and a proof that America has become malevolent by this column, of course. The second claim here is that Donald Trump blamed Ukraine for starting the war with Russia. Excuse me. Now, what Trump meant, I believe, is not that Ukraine is to blame, but rather that the attempt to have Ukraine join NATO and therefore put NATO missiles right on the border of Russia is what provoked the war. And Russia's demands, if you remember, before Boris Johnson came in at the behest of the Biden White House, and blew up negotiations. Russia's demands were basically Ukraine must not join NATO. This is something that the West promised Ukraine a long time ago. Basically, I believe after the USSR broke apart, they promised not to advance further than a certain point closer to Russia, and they broke that promise many times, and now they're basically on the border if Ukraine joins. If you remember the missile crisis, where basically the USSR tried to put missiles on the border of the US, that did not pan out nearly as violently because the USSR gave up. But, you know, America was perfectly willing to go to war over that. So how come when Russia feels the same way, we suddenly paint them as the aggressor and say, well, you're evil? No, I don't think Trump was wrong to say that the war is not, let's say, provoked by Russia's greed for land, but by NATO trying to station missiles at Putin's doorstep. Oh, my voice is going. Anyway, the third thing here is US officials appeared to promptly offer Russia almost everything it wants before negotiations on Ukraine were underway. So basically, they're talking here about Ukraine not joining NATO and Russia maintaining some of the land it won in the war. That's basically it. Which both makes sense if you think about it. There's no resolution to this conflict unless Ukraine is barred from NATO. And, well, this might have been it if they took the proposal before the war, but now that there has been a war and Russia did win and expended quite a bit of resources to do so due to the intervention of NATO, they probably expect some gains from this hard-fought win. So it's not unreasonable, let's say. Now, to continue the article, the reaction of mainstream European observers was neatly summed up by Gideon Rahman in the Financial Times. The Trump administration's political ambitions for Europe mean that, for now, America is also an adversary. And that's quite harsh. Now, the writer says, is this view correct? A skeptic might recall that there have been serious rifts in the transatlantic partnership on major occasions prior. Over threats in 1956, over nuclear strategy in Vietnam in 1960s, and so on and so on. But the point he's making is that few Europeans or Canadians believed the United States was deliberately trying to harm them. They believed that Washington was genuinely committed to their security and understood that its own security and prosperity was tied to their own. They were right, and he continues basically to say that this is no longer the case. So, is he correct? Is the new Trump administration hostile or malevolent to Europe and friendly to dictatorships like Russia? I don't think so. Not at all. If you notice, Trump was boasting about threatening Putin, and that's why Putin never invaded Ukraine during his tenure. Trump does talk with these dictators, but often using the language of strength, not in a friendly manner and certainly not in a conciliatory manner. On the other hand, the thing that Trump does differ from the European Union on is leadership. I'm talking here about the nature of the leadership of Europe versus the new Trump administration. So Europe is led by basically bureaucrats and corporate types. You know, like the new Chancellor of Germany, Friedrich Merz, who basically worked as an executive for BlackRock for years before becoming the Chancellor. You have basically the WEF, the World Economic Forum, with their Young Global Leader program, where basically they populate the cabinets of many Western nations with their prodigies. And the whole penetrate the cabinets quote from Klaus Schwab, if you know it, is an admission. I believe at some point over half the government of Canada was young global leaders and such from the WEF, including Prime Minister Trudeau himself. So these guys are basically the European leadership, especially at the European Union level, where, you know, you have unelected bureaucrats and such. Yeah, these are the sorts of people who populate such bodies, and Trump is hostile to them. Trump basically says, you want a bureaucracy, you want technocracy, you want this many top-down controls, digital IDs and so on, CBDCs, and Trump promised there will not be CBDCs so long as I'm president. Trump is trying to curtail the activities of such groups and maintain individual freedoms, freedom of speech, freedom of movement. If you know the whole 15-minute cities experiment where they try to limit or ban private cars, invoke very high taxes over driving them and such. The whole point of the European Union is to create a top-down technocracy with all the digital controls in the name of safety, of course, and efficiency. And Trump is against it. And Trump is also against the influence of the corporations that sponsor all of this stuff, against the interests of people like George Soros, the bodies like BlackRock, and so on. So yeah, Trump is an enemy of the money and privileged groups behind the leadership of the European Union, not of the people of Europe themselves. Not as though he's doing something to hurt your interests, he's just opposed to the world order that your leaders are a part of. And that's what makes him dangerous to them, that's what makes him an enemy. If the European Union tries to create a more centralized economy and society with lots of digital controls, and the United States remains free of these, and then things are better off in the United States, people will be pointing there and saying, why can't we have that? Clearly, this is not normal. And normalizing the whole digital world that they're trying to create, smart cities, digital IDs, and so on, is a very important part of getting people to accept it. If they can pretend that things have always been this way, and this isn't special, this isn't anything worse than what you had yesterday, it's much easier to pacify people than if you actually have to fight against the living example of what was and could still be if you just chose a different route. In the end, if you remember, democracies have always been provoking the ire of dystopian and tyrannical states that are near them, because they're basically an example of just how badly the tyrant and despot are messing up. How impoverished and dangerous and tightly controlled the society you live in is, actually. So, in a way, you could say that the US and Europe are like two trains on the same track, headed in completely opposite directions. And the distance between them will always increase, and quite quickly too. There's been no change of pace or direction from, let's say, the WEF or Brussels, Davos groups, and so on. They're basically saying more of the same, just we need to restore trust in institutions and also continue doing what we're doing. And I don't think the two things can exist together, incidentally. I do believe that as more and more of the progressive narrative becomes implemented in Europe, people will be leaning further and further away, and trust in institutions will continue to erode. That said, the scope of this video is all about, is Europe going to be adversarial to the US? And my gut says, not for now. They're too dependent, both in terms of the military alliance, where basically their defense spending is very low and they depend on the US to protect them. You also have the fact that basically the infrastructure for all of the internet and digital stuff basically comes from the US. Europe is too, how to put it, bureaucratic. There's too much red tape for such companies to crop up and become large and successful. So that's why all the social medias that you use in Europe are still American. The banking system is built on the American SWIFT system. Basically, it's going to take a while for Europe to become independent of America. And in the meantime, they may well have a change in leadership. I mean, Trump, Vance, Elon Musk, and so on, backing the right in Europe could have an effect. They could give more platform for these people to talk. They could have interviews or debates or all sorts of ways to promote these contenders. And I think that's why the sort of Davos people are very concerned and angry. They feel as though an ally has betrayed them, because the US used to be just the same under Biden and Kamala Harris, but now it's gone on a completely different route. They feel the danger of this, and, well, they're not willing to sit still, but they're also hampered by just how dependent their countries have become on the US. Incidentally, Trump did warn them that basically energy dependence on Russia was a bad idea. Yeah, now you can see he also wanted the NATO to play more, how to put it, into the funding of the army that protects them. Increasing the defense spending is now going to happen regardless, it seems, just to invest in their own military instead of, the US military to protect them. Kind of ironic, in a way. I'm not sure, again, just how far they're willing to go with this rhetoric, but it is kind of fiery already. So I don't know how much more they can go. In the end, I honestly believe that the European bureaucrats don't have the spine to truly get into a fight with America. They're going to do what a lot of other leaders have done when Trump throws down an ultimatum. Puff their chests, make a lot of noise, and once they see that he's serious, actually back off and give in. It's been happening with other countries that had a lot of illegal migration into the US, and then Trump tells them, well, if you don't take these people back, we'll just tariff you. And at first they go, well, I'm not afraid of you, let's go. And soon after, usually within a day or two, they actually give in and say, of course we'll take them. Just don't be mad. Just don't be angry. And we might just see this movie repeat with the European Union. Who knows? Well, that's enough for today. Thanks for watching, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.